What's up, everyone? This is Casey, and welcome back to the channel. So, today is your stimulus update, stimulus package update for September 1st, 2020. Thanks, everyone, for joining the channel. And as always, I want to make sure I give you guys the latest stimulus update. So, if you guys are new to the channel, I just wanted to share something with you guys before we jump into this. I've seen some comments in a number of my videos stating that there's a lot of frustration with a lot of the other YouTube channels providing clickbait. And I couldn't agree with you guys more. While there are a lot of channels that are actually providing very real content and updates, there are some clickbaity channels. And if you guys are not looking for clickbait, which no one ever is, then you guys are on the right channel. I do pride myself on making sure that not only do we completely avoid that here, but we also want to make sure that we are providing updates really only when there's necessary, or where there's some actual real progress. So that's kind of what this channel is about. So if you guys are fortunate enough to tune in, I really appreciate you doing that, and let's just kind of hop into it. So the latest right now is we have some movement from the Republicans on the stimulus agreement amount. So as of last week, the Republicans only wanted to pass $500 billion package. They originally had proposed a $1 trillion package, and then they decided, nah, let's just kick that down to $500 billion, and then that was that. Well, it turns out that they have had some movement since Manchin and actually Meadows, I should say Mark Meadows, had some conversations with Nancy Pelosi last week to where they now are at a $1.5 trillion package proposal. Now, from the Democratic side, I'm sure you guys are well aware, the Nancy Pelosi, they originally proposed a $3.4 trillion package. They then kicked that down to $2 trillion. And Nancy Pelosi said that they don't want to move off that. That $2.2 trillion is what they want, and that is that. So what we have right now is we have the Democrats that are now at the $2.2 trillion, 2.2, 2.4, and we have the Republicans that have now come up to $1.5 trillion. So now they're about $900 billion off. What do all these ridiculous numbers mean for us, the average citizens that are waiting on stimulus checks and trying to get the stimulus package passed, that actually want to have an update? Well, this means that we're making some progress. From right now, we have the Republicans that said that they weren't going to budge on a deal. They weren't going to budge in their actual amount, and they have. We have talks that have started to ramp back up again. We have more updates that are coming up into the news, which is a positive thing. And another very unique thing as well is we have Mark Meadows and Nancy Pelosi providing more insight into actually what's taking place with their conversations, I should say the negotiations behind the scenes. So Mark Meadows, he said that no surprise, he said that negotiations were being stalled as a result of Speaker Nancy Pelosi. He said that basically the conversation that they had a 25-minute phone call, and he asked specifically Nancy Pelosi what was in their $2.2 trillion package. And he stated that she basically said, well, don't worry about it, which is very interesting because when Nancy Pelosi was asked about how the conversations went with Mark Meadows, she said that he said that, don't worry about the $1.5 trillion package. I highly doubt either one of them said that, or if it did, something was taken out of context. I can't possibly imagine either one of them said that during the negotiations, but if they did, that's a concern. A very unique caveat in terms of how they're negotiating is that Mark Meadows is stating that Nancy Pelosi just wants to negotiate the top number and not actually negotiate the individual pieces in the package. So he's stating that Nancy Pelosi wants to agree on a total package amount first, and then agree on which packages are going to get what amounts of money in that deal. And that's just, and that in a way is kind of backwards, if that is actually truthful. Now, Mark Meadows is saying that how he wants to negotiate, which I think would make more sense, would be to negotiate the individual packages themselves within the total stimulus package. For example, the unemployment amount. How much do we want to provide for that? Do we want $300, $400, $500, and so forth? How much of the government stimulus do we want to provide? So my understanding, just from the notes and everything that I've been reading, the government stimulus, the state and local funding, is the biggest hangup right now. And I think that they really should be able to come to a consensus on this, and I'll tell you why. So as of right now, the details, the devil are in the details. And what's happening right now is that the Democrats, they are proposing a very large stimulus package because they're saying that the states need a lot more funding than what they actually need, which is very interesting because it turns out that Nancy Pelosi, or should say the Democrats, are trying to get state funding for in advance of 2 years total to try to meet their actual budgets and their deficits. Well, the Republicans are like, well, we don't want to do that. We only want to try to meet them for the 1 year, and then we'll worry about this and revisit it as time goes on. I should say a year later. So that's where a really, really big gap comes into this. So much to where it's a $900 billion gap between what the Republicans and Democrats want. So the aid to the state and local governments, it's $915 billion. And in the HEROES Act total, it was a total, I would say represents about 30% of the total package. Now, this alone represents $765 billion of the $900 billion divide. So you really think that if they can really hammer out and come to an agreement on the state and local government package, we should be good to go. Now, a not so positive thing is we haven't seen any additional talks with the second stimulus check. Now, as I stated in my last video, is the second stimulus check going to be a life changer for a lot of us? No. But can it help soften the blow a little bit, help, pay, I should say, a couple of months of rent or 1 month's rent or a mortgage? Absolutely. And I think that it certainly should help, especially considering that they've passed the 3 stimulus packages already, and the institutions that have gotten a lot of this money are at all-time highs. So the Federal Reserve stepped in and they said, months ago when we first had this pandemic, that they wanted to inject liquidity into the markets to help stabilize the economy and the markets. Well, they've done a hell of a lot more than just stabilize the economy. So much so to where we have the technology stocks that are at all-time highs. We have Tesla, we have Apple that have done splits. We have Microsoft that is coming close to an all-time high. We have Google, we have Facebook. This is a tech bubble amongst tech bubbles. And none of this had started to take place until the Fed started to inject liquidity. So it's obvious they don't have any issues injecting liquidity into businesses. I think we need to start directing some of that more so to the citizens and the people who are laid off and who could actually use it for employment and so forth. And so if they can come to an agreement on an actual middle ground on the state and local government funding, I think we'll be in a really good place. To get even more detail with that, one of the contentious issues is that the student funding, the school funding, the Democrats want to provide a lot more school funding than what the Republicans want to provide. Now, if we go back and we take a look at the $915 billion state and local government funding, if you take a look at the analytics, it puts the budget shortfall for the states and the local governments at $500 billion for the year, not $915 billion. And so it appears as though that the Democrats, they want to ensure that the state and local governments have funding for the next 2 years without actually waiting for the next year to see how the funds get allocated and waiting to see how the economy comes out of this recession, or I should say, comes out of this stagnation period, if you will. And so I find it very interesting that the Democrats want to provide so much funding because they're not very clear on where that money is going to go and how that's going to be distributed. So that's a very interesting thing. Now, on the Democratic side as well, a lot of people are getting very impatient. Right now, the question remains, if any, the question flat out just remains, what's going to incentivize either side to compromise? The House Democrats, they've urged Speaker Nancy Pelosi to reach an agreement, and the Republicans have done the same. And so that's kind of what's sparking the continual conversations to get a deal done. Now, what do I think is going to ultimately happen? Well, here we are on September 1st, and we know that the elections are coming up here in the next few months. And so what I think is going to happen, right, because it's all about time and politics, is I think that they're going to probably wait maybe about 3 weeks or a month before the elections, and then they're going to say, oh, look at that, a deal got done. And the reason being is because a lot of the best deals that ever get made when it comes to business are almost always made in the 11th hour, particularly when you have two sides that are very contentious and don't want to budge. And so I think that they're going to wait until the 11th hour, probably 2-3 weeks before the elections are set to come about, and then they're going to automatically, I just made that word up, by the way. They're going to automatically just announce that we have a stimulus package. Now, it's going to be interesting to know whether or not they are going to provide a stimulus check. We do know for sure that the unemployment is non-negotiable. Both sides are very solid on that. It does appear to be that it's going to be an additional $300 to $400 So we know that that's going to take place, and there is going to be a moratorium that gets taken place for evictions and so forth. So that's pretty much it, guys. That's the latest. We know that they've made some movement. They are budging. They're getting closer to the middle.